Welcome into the Stardom Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Stefen McKinney, joined as always by Ashton Mitchell and Jacob Stevens. Guys, it's our last rankings show before we really jump into the season and we get going with our forecast, our predictions for each game. We're only 1 week away from the NFL. I saw your tight end rankings. I got them in front of me. Some surprises on there. I know, Ashton, you're going to be a little disappointed that Gronk didn't make it into our consensus top 10. But I
don't even know if I can partake in this show anymore. It's just...
I do feel like we have spent a lot of time talking about Gronk so far already. And I'm sure
we've had enough of that
in the future. We did our first league fantasy draft last weekend. A lot of fun, guys. Everybody's teams seemed to shake out pretty good. I was impressed by both your teams.
Let's tell everyone where everyone drafted too.
Oh, sure. I mean, first off, I want to acknowledge that Jacob sniped a lot of my picks that I've been talking about during the podcast.
He sniped a lot of mine too. I see a trend there.
Oh, I saw it. He took AJ Green, who I talked up. He took Devontae Parker, who I talked up, and then the person who talks so much about not taking
waiting for QB
early,
takes Lamar in round 3.
Took Lamar Jackson round 3, which was the biggest surprise to me during the draft. I mean, there were some crazy picks, but they were from a little less experienced fantasy people.
I'm going to be honest. I almost shed a tear when he picked Lamar round 3 because I literally had Lamar queued up. Because
Stefen said he was going to take him too. When he bounced back around, I had my 2 running backs. I was feeling solid with everything. I was like, this is the time.
I was hurting. I was picked 10, and I was struggling to get some running backs. And I was like, well, I can just make those up with picking up Lamar in round 3. That shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
But you got Todd Gurley instead.
And I had to fill the spot with Todd Gurley. I swear, man. Todd Gurley better hype it up this year.
You gotta have faith in Todd Gurley. When we were talking Melvin Gordon, David Johnson, Todd Gurley,
that's one of our season-long bets, isn't it? He took Gurley.
They're talking about giving him 15, 20 touches a game. We'll see how long that lasts.
You have all the faith in the world in him.
I think he's very talented.
If you're going to tell our listeners that you favor him over those other 2 guys.
Hey, well, I put my money where my mouth is then.
Yeah, there you go.
You just seem very disappointed that you got him at the time.
Well, I mean, in comparison to having Lamar Jackson round 3, I think
fair enough.
There were some other
Thank you.
There.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, guys, I was impressed by both your teams. I'm looking forward to playing you guys in that league. I know we still got a couple more drafts to do before the season starts. But there's been some big news this week. Maybe some news that would have changed how we drafted last weekend that has come out in the last couple of days. First and foremost, I think the biggest news, the biggest surprise to everybody that Leonard Fournette was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars, leaving Raquel Armstead, Chris Thompson, and not 100% sure that I'm going to pronounce this right, but
good luck.
Devine Azigbo.
Sounds good to me.
Azigbo and Armstead are second-year guys. Armstead has a little higher draft capital. Azigbo was an undrafted rookie last year. And then you got the vet and Chris Thompson, who's obviously joining Gruden there. So what do you guys kind of take from this? What's your expectations for Leonard Fournette? What's your expectations for this Jacksonville backfield with Fournette gone? What are you guys kind of expecting now that this is actually taking place?
Well, I think it's a surprise, but it's not a surprise. I mean, they've been trying to get rid of him for a while. I'm just surprised that it happened
this close.
9-10 days away from week 1.
Right.
I think it's going to be run by committee and then situational each week, depending on who they're playing. So game script focused.
And they're going to be passing it a bunch.
They're going to be.
They've dismantled that team, and they've had some injuries. So it's.
Jay Gruden has the history with Chris Thompson. Jay Gruden likes the pass option with running backs, but I don't know. We'll have to see. I don't just be cautious when you're picking up a running back with this offense right now. I think they're going to focus definitely on the passing game for sure, but where that might have me lead a little bit more with Chris Thompson, but just because I'm familiar with that and I know what kind of play calling Jake Gruden is used to calling through when he had him with Washington, but I think it could unfold to be something a little bit different in Jacksonville. So, but just be cautious.
Yeah, I would just add to that it's not looking good there. And these guys, if you're going to take one of them, maybe drop someone else that got injured on your lineup, or just take the latest late round flyer you can. If someone else takes them, who cares? I mean, it's probably not going to pay dividends anyway. But just I was going to add earlier when we did our draft, it just showed us that how big running backs are. And if you don't get them in those first 2-3 rounds, you're screwed. So that's just another note, but I'm not really very excited about it. I don't think Leonard Fournette, I mean, if he signs anywhere, I don't see him just being catapulted into a starting role anywhere. So if you've got him, I mean, hold on to him. Obviously, if you've already drafted him, I'm so sorry, RIP, but he might get, he should sign on with somebody. I mean, he was a 4th round pick overall a few years ago.
4 overall.
1st round, 4th overall over Patty Mahomes, Deshaun Watson. So
yeah,
I mean, who knows? It's Jacksonville, so maybe somewhere else would be a good change for him. But if you got him, hold on to him. If you're drafting, draft him. Maybe 10, 12 round. Stefen, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you got to draft. I mean, look, when we did our drafts a couple of days ago, he got drafted, I believe, in the 2nd round. I think his ADP was around early third round, but there's been there's been the issues with Fournette and Jacksonville since last year where they didn't really see eye to eye, and you knew that situation was kind of getting watered down and something was going to happen. But apparently they couldn't get any
7th round, nobody would
trade for him, so they had to release him.
So do you feel like they weren't getting anything because they knew Jacksonville was just going to let them go regardless, and they can pick them up?
That's a possibility. And they could play the waiver
That's my
game.
strategy on it. Like, look, if I know that they're going to get rid of them one way or another, why pay more in a package trade deal with Jacksonville when you can just pick them up as a free agent?
As the Jets about Kalen Ballage.
Yeah, so look, I mean, I think Leonard Fournette, obviously is going to get picked up by another team. I don't know who that team is. According to some of the betting experts, the favorites I think right now are the Patriots, the Bears,
Washington.
Yeah, obviously there's some running back needy teams out there. And Fournette, I mean, he was a fantastic running back in college. He has been a good running back for fantasy, but has not been very
live up to that hype.
I guess efficient. As a running back so far in his NFL career, but he will be picked up by somebody. If you're still drafting, obviously be cautious with Fournette until we hear other news about him signing with someone. In terms of what to do with that running back situation in Jacksonville, I think what I've seen so far is that Raquel Armstead is the guy that people are trying to grab in their leagues. But I'm not sure that is the right move. He was on the COVID list, so they hadn't seen a lot of him in training camp so far. So I don't know if that's why they were willing to release him. I think it's more of they have faith in the 3 running backs as a whole. So I think they're going to roll out with that committee. You're going to see Armstead. You're going to see Chris Thompson. You're going to see Zigbo. I think there's going to be a very split backfield. Thompson obviously is a very good running back in terms of
until he gets hurt.
Yeah, and obviously you don't know what to do with his injury situation. He never seems to make it throughout a season. But when he is on the field, he is very relevant, especially in PPR leagues. So I think if you're in a PPR league or even a half-point PPR, I would prioritize Chris Thompson. If you're in a standard, I think you can maybe look towards Armstead or a Zigbo.
So what do you do what do you tell the people that have already drafted Leonard Fournette in their leagues?
Oh, hold on to him and hope for the best.
Yeah. Yep. But I think if you're picking someone up if you're doing your draft still, I would draft Chris Thompson and Armstead. I would draft them, around that 9th, 10th round where you're taking flyers on people anyway. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to the next piece of news here. We won't spend as much time on some of these other pieces. As of today, Alvin Kamara, there's been some speculation that the Saints are willing to hear trade offers for Alvin Kamara. Whether or not that is true or not, we do not know. Kamara and his agent were apparently caught by surprise with this news. They thought they were on their way to getting a long-term deal into place. He has missed the last 3 days of practice with unexcused absences.
It was he said today that he got an epidural in his back for some pain or whatever, but
the team apparently was unaware of this because
miscommunication
absence.
Hopefully.
So we'll have to keep an eye on that situation. If you do have Kamara, hopefully
me.
If you do have Kamara, hopefully you're hedging that bet with Latavius Murray. They do have, I believe, Ty Montgomery in New Orleans now.
He's there.
So maybe he's on your waivers, I'm sure. But just keep an eye on that situation as it continues to unfold. Hopefully we will hear some more information tomorrow. He is expected to be back at practice tomorrow, September 2nd. So we'll have to keep an eye on that, see what happens there. Joe Mixon, who has apparently been missing the last couple of days of practice with migraines, has signed a new 4-year contract extension, making some money. Pretty good looking deal. And his migraines have magically disappeared. So
the bank account helps
to
for
be
sure.
Out there week 1, ready to go. Miles Sanders had suffered a hamstring issue at the beginning of camp. I believe it's a hamstring strain. We did see him out on the field today on the sidelines doing some non-contact drills. As of right now, we do expect him to suit up week 1. Jalen Reagor, a rookie for the Eagles, who a lot of people are excited about with Alshon Jeffrey being injured and some of those questions with the wide receivers there in Philadelphia, has a tear in his shoulders and will miss at least 3 to 4 weeks to start the season. That was a big disappointment for me because I did draft him. I was excited about him to start the season.
Yep.
With this news, I'm not so sure about him anymore because, by the time he comes back, I would expect Alshon Jeffrey to be back. I think it's going to be a little bit harder for him to get,
the reps he needs,
the looks and the connection with Wentz that I was expecting him and hoping for him to get at the start of the season with Jeffrey out. So I would downgrade Reagor if you're still doing your drafts. Maybe take a last or second to last round pick on Reagor especially if you have an IR spot and you can just throw him on there and pick up someone else after.
Did you hear what happened for Reagor what happened to it? Like how that all happened when he hurt his shoulder?
I did not know.
So Carson Wentz, he was hurting once again. He had a soft issue and was hurting. So he went off and Jalen Hurts came on, threw a pick, and Jalen Reagor went to tackle a guy that picked it off the pass, which the play should have been called dead.
Yeah.
A lot of people have been talking about, and he tackled him instead and destroyed his shoulder. That's how it happened.
You hate to see it. It is tough for a lot of these rookie wide receivers to get going in the NFL. It's a completely different system to learn. So,
and a shortened off season too with COVID and everything. So it's definitely a tough spot to be in for Stefen because he drafted Jalen Reagor.
It's a big hit to Reagor. But look. Cheers. If you have some of those other receiving options for Philly in week 1, there's not a lot left. So expect maybe a big game from Deshaun Jackson. You might see one of those 2 touchdown games you get. Seems to be once a year with Deshaun Jackson nowadays, where he'll just come out and catch an 80-yard bomb or something like that. Expect a big game from Ertz, Miles Sanders. Hopefully Dallas Goedert will get some
Goddard
work.
will get involved for sure. You got to throw it to somebody.
That does boost a lot of these other guys that are there. So, and a lot of those guys are getting picked up late in drafts. So, if you need someone to plug in for those first couple of weeks, those might be interesting options for you. Next piece of note: Tyrell Williams, who had a decent fantasy season last year.
He got injured. Yeah, hit a bunch of touchdowns.
Raiders was put on season-ending IR. So that's a boost for the rookie Henry Ruggs. There's a couple other wide receivers there that might get your attention. You got Hunter Renfrow, who actually had a decent season as well last year, better season than expected. could get more looks. You might see some more looks for Josh Jacobs, and especially Darren Waller will just eat up those targets, who is the guy who made our top 10. So we'll talk more about him coming up. The last piece of note that I wanted to hit on real quick was Chris Herndon, who dealt with some chest issues all year last year, was taken into the locker room today at practice with some tightness in his chest. So that is another situation to look out for. He was being drafted as one of those late round tight ends that, if you didn't get one of the early ones, you could hold on to and see how he plays.
A trendy sleeper.
Yep.
If you will.
He has seemed to impress when he was on the field over the last 2 years. But it just doesn't seem like he can stay on the field. So I don't know if he's worth drafting right now. Maybe keep an eye on the situation and pick him up on the waivers if he has a good week 1, week 2, looks healthy.
Which I don't think he's really getting drafted in most leagues, right?
Yeah, I think if he is getting drafted, he's getting picked up in the last couple of rounds for those guys who wait on their tight ends. But if you guys don't have any other news, let's just jump on into our final positional rankings.
Let's do it.
Cool. All right, guys. Number 1. I was just saying before we started the show that this was a surprise that Kittle actually ended up as our consensus number 1. Jacob and myself had him at 1 and Ashton at 2. Look, guys, it could really go either way with Kittle and Kelsey. They're clearly the 2 top tier guys when we're talking tight ends. If you get either one of them, you should be ecstatic. They are going super early in drafts. So just be wary. Kittle is currently going as the second tight end off the board, number 20 overall. Jacob, what is it about Kittle that you have him number 1 over Kelsey?
Man, he's just so darn explosive. He gets so many yards after the catch, which is very important for that position. And what I'm looking at this year is it's a number of things. Jimmy G, another full season, healthy last year, so that connection's obviously fruitful. We saw that last year. But what's happening in San Francisco right now is insane. I mean, everyone is injured. They have no receiving options. I think Kevin White is out there catching passes, and none of you probably know who that is because I hardly know who that is. But I think there's just too much volume, and he's so talented. It kind of feels like Gronk with the way he plays the game, but obviously much younger and less injured. Ashton,
easy.
So I'm thinking he's gonna dethrone Kelsey this year. Kelsey's been the number 1 tight end for the number 1 tight end, I believe, 3 years in a row. Does that sound right?
4, I think.
4 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
I just think he's going to have the volume there, and you can't really. I think what you see in with these tight ends, these elite tight ends, is you can't really plan for them in your defensive scheming, just because they move around so much, they block in certain plays. And if you're just trying to challenge them, and then you're going to open things up for everyone else. So I think he's just really got a lot going on for him this year. He got the bag, and I think he's just going to dethrone Kelsey. I'm sorry, Ashton, but I mean, I'm sorry.
I don't care.
Okay, it should be
whether it's Kelsey or Kittle. I mean, it's no skin off my back. I'm just going by what I believe is true, and that Kelsey is the more dominant tight end. Look, 4 years in a row where he's had 1,000+ yards. He's in his prime. I think he's 30 years old. I don't see them setting too much back in the passing game with the Chiefs this season going into it. And I think Kelsey's going to get plenty of targets. Kelsey had 136 targets with 97 receptions last year, 5 touchdowns. Kittle had 107 targets, 85 receptions. Kittle had 1,053 yards. Kelsey had 1,229. But I know Kittle missed 2 games, right? So kind of wonder how close the numbers would be, how much closer the numbers would be if Kittle had played a full season. So it is close. I'm not taking that away at all, and I'm not taking anything away from Kittle's talent. I just think Kelsey's just a smidge higher on the talent level there. And I think it comes with opportunity too. I think there's a little bit more opportunity in Kansas City than there is San Francisco. San Francisco is going to rely much heavier on the run game versus a more balanced offense in Kansas City. So that's why I have Kelsey at 1 and Kittle at 2.
Yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I think I could argue the alternative in that while I do think Kansas City is going to air the ball a lot more, they do have more weapons to throw it to. Tyreek Hill, you expect CEH to get involved in the receiving game. Sammy Watkins will have a game every once in a while.
The Lizard
Hardman should have a bigger year this year. There's just a lot more options, it seems to me, where I think Kittle is clearly the guy in San Fran. Like, there's no real threats to Kittle.
No doubt about that. Way more options to pass the ball in Kansas City than in San Fran. But
I mean, also on the that talent of the QB too.
Right, and yes, 100%. And on top of that, Kelsey last year was receiving over 40% of the passes, anyways. I mean, he's Mahomes' number 1 target.
Yeah.
I don't think that will change either. So I think he's, no matter how much they throw the ball, he's still going to see a more dominant rate of passes thrown his way versus anyone else on the field. I mean, unless something drastic changes, but sure. That's my prediction. So
sure. Yep. Well, yeah, I mean, I think either way, like, I mean, in terms of Kittle and Kelsey, their averages per game are the exact same. They average 12.9 points in half PPR leagues. Both of them average that exact same number. So, I mean, you're getting a locked.
You're splitting hairs here.
Yeah, you're getting a locked in guy if you get Kittle or Kelsey.
You're not going to cry if you miss Kelsey and have to pick up Kittle. Yeah.
But vice versa. I would say for guys playing in like 10-team leagues, not like 12 or any larger leagues where tight ends are kind of a premium, and these two guys will set themselves apart from the other guys. So taking them in this second, third round wouldn't be crazy if you can get your hands on them. It's because if you're in those smaller leagues, there's just so much talent to go around, and that they're just elite at that spot.
Yeah, so I think the only issue is, because I think most people know that Kittle and Kelsey are the two best when it comes to fantasy and tight ends. The only thing really that is kind of a drawback here, the question you have to ask yourself, they're both going in the second round of drafts right now. Kittle at number 20 and Kelsey at number 14. When you look at some of the guys that are getting drafted around that same area, you're looking at kind of those second tier running backs as well as that top absolute tier of wide receivers. Around Kelsey, you have Nick Chubb, DeAndre Hopkins, Kenyon Drake, Josh Jacobs. Kittle, you got Chris Godwin, Lamar Jackson, Patty Mahomes, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Aaron Jones. Like, that's kind of where you have to make that decision. Do you go with one of these top tight end options over these guys, or are you guys looking more to one of those wide receivers or running back options?
The way I look at it is, if you're going in your draft and you're thinking, you know what, I want to get a really good tight end this year, or I want to get a really good QB this year, you cannot do both. If you want to do one, you can do one, but I highly suggest you get a running back in that first round. You draft that tight end. I mean, I think did they fall to the third round for us, Stefen? Or I think it's kind of on the verge of that. I can't remember.
I don't think so. I think they went second round.
I think it depends on.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Well, I was just sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just saying, I think it kind of depends on where you fall in your draft. Like, if I'm drafting earlier in an earlier position in our, say we do 12-man team league, if I'm drafting first 6 positions, I'm not searching for a tight end as early in rounds as I am if I'm in the back 6. So I was 10 spot this last draft we did a couple days ago, and I was aiming for top 3 tight ends because I knew it was going to be a scramble when it came back to me in the later rounds. It's going to be a dog hunt back then. So I think from my perspective, from my understanding, how I kind of go about my draft, I'll let it kind of fall on where I fall in the draft position. So, and it also kind of, you have to take a numbers game to it. As you know, if you have a top 1 or 2 wide receiver that's going to take those high massive targets, then you have to look at it that way and maybe balance it out that way. But it really just depends on your strategy.
The only thing for me is, look, I mean, if we look at them at their points last year compared to a wide receiver, Kittle would have finished as a wide receiver 21 on the year. He did miss 2 games. And Kelsey would have finished as wide receiver 12 in a half-point PPR. So to me, when I'm looking at value, I can get one of these guys who's a wide receiver that's going to finish hopefully with more points than Kelsey, but there are a lot of more wide receiver options.
So many wide receivers this year, particularly. Yeah. So maybe this is your year to take a tight end.
Yeah, but for me, I think as we preached multiple episodes, taking running backs early is so important to build that depth at the running back position, because it just falls off like a cliff by round 5. You have no guarantees left.
Even before that, I mean, it's a stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, you're picking
your
up
waiver chasing all year long if you don't have the depth.
Unless you have the points coming in from other positions and it's consistent, you're gonna be hurting throughout the season.
Yeah. So for me, I don't think I'm taking a tight end in round 2. If they fall to the middle of round 3, I'm happy to jump all on that. But I can't get myself to take him in round 2. I'm still, I think, taking running backs round 2 and waiting on a tight end for a later round when I can get some of the lower maybe talent of echelon and maybe hope for a breakout like we saw with Darren Waller last year. But look, we kind of captured Kittle and Kelsey with that conversation. So let's jump right on to number 3 here. Someone who had a huge year with Lamar Jackson last year. We all have him as our unanimous tight end number 3, Mark Andrews. Do you guys expect the same level of success that we saw with Mark Andrews last year? I mean, he was a touchdown machine with Lamar. It just seemed like he scored a touchdown every single game. He had 10 touchdowns on the year. Maybe not as many receptions as you saw with Kittle and Kelsey, but what do y'all think with Mark Andrews? What is y'all's take on him? I think clearly he's not in the same tier as Kittle and Kelsey at this point, but do you expect him to maybe make that bump up into that conversation this year?
Well, I think
on the field.
Yeah, I think his targets are going to go up this year because they got rid of Hayden Hurst, right?
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So they're going to spread the ball out a little bit more between the two, between Boyle and Andrews now. So I think the targets are going to go up for him. I think it'll be amazing if he can stay in double digits with touchdowns. I don't know if that's going to happen this year, but I do believe that he is his number 1 receiver. But I can see Hollywood Brown coming in and having a real pop-off year this year. I'm real high on Marquise Brown this year. So I think you're going to see those targets kind of shift a little bit more towards Marquise as well, which takes a little bit away from Andrews, but I still think he's a top 3. I mean, I drafted him in our league this year. So
yeah, you did.
I'm stoked. I'm real stoked on having both. Actually, I got both of them. So I got Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. So, but
stack.
I think he's a really talented tight end. I think he's on that cusp of being in that top tier with Kittle and Kelsey. And I think it just depends on opportunity, which I think should be available this year to him.
Yeah. So for me, main issue, I think he'll still be just as efficient. Or it'll probably dip. Okay, 10 touchdowns and 64 catches is pretty crazy. But I think he's gonna have more catches. He was really low on. I can't remember the number, but he was super low on the amount of routes run compared to Kelsey and Kittle and these guys on the field all the time. He was hardly on the field. It seemed like at 98 targets in that offense. I mean, it's just an explosive offense, and you never know what Lamar Jackson is going to take off and do. So I think it kind of opens up for him, and that's why he was able to be so effective. And same thing with if you look at the running back, Mark Ingram, he was able to do the same thing. I think Lamar Jackson just opens up the entire offense, and that's why they were on fire. So Marquise Brown was a little banged up last year, but I don't think that's going to affect Mark Andrews in the red zone. I think Mark Andrews is he's going to stay elite, and if he's on the field more. That's kind of what you want to see and I think that's what's going to happen. Like you said, Hayden Hurst is gone. So I think he'll be fine in the red zone.
So do you think he's more touchdown dependent this year?
No, I think he's less. I think he's less than last
year. Just
year.
Because he's going to get more opportunity with receptions.
He's going to be on the field more. He won't need as many touchdowns because he'll just actually be on the field.
All right.
Yeah, for me, I think obviously Mark Andrews had a huge year last year. Was super impressed by him. He was clearly Lamar Jackson's favorite target out there. Was scoring touchdowns left and right. I am a little worried about that he's not able to stay as efficient as he was last year and make the best out of his targets that he did last year. I mean, you can see the difference with him compared to Kittle and Kelsey. I mean, Kelsey the last 2 years has had 97 receptions and 103 receptions, whereas Kittle has been right around that 85, 88 range. Whereas Mark Andrews only had 64 receptions last year. So that is really where I think he needs to take that next step in order to get into that conversation. You need to see him around 80 receptions this year in order to have that discussion. He needs to get around 1,000 yards.
You want to hear something crazy?
That's not a talent thing. That's an opportunity thing. That's
Right.
coaching. That's play
But
calling.
hey, you got to take that into effect.
Yeah.
No,
I agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, look, I mean, this is how I look at it. I look at it as Kelsey and Kettle are the spotlight of their offense. Like, their offense is based on those two guys. Like, they are the main focus of those offenses. Whereas Baltimore, look, that's Lamar Jackson's offense. Like, he is going to run. Mark Andrews is going to get open, and he is going to find him. But I can't make up a scenario in my head where Andrews is getting in that same reception category as Kittle and Kelsey with Lamar Jackson's skill set. I think they're just going to rely too heavily on the run for Mark Andrews to be in that discussion, to finish as a 1 or 2. But look, he can be in that second tier and be the top of that second tier and not be an issue for you because he's going later in drafts. He's going as the last pick in the 3rd round right now, 36 overall. I'm fine where he's being taken and the production that he's going to give back to you because that's where you're getting into that second tier of wide receivers that, you know, you're going to get similar production around. So I have no issues with Mark Andrews performing the exact same as he did last year, getting the exact same amount of targets and receptions. And hopefully, you know, you base that as your floor and hope that he can only go up.
Right.
Next up on our list, someone who we're split on just because of me, but Zach Ertz. Ashton, you had him at 4. Jacob, you had him at 4, and I had him at 5. He finished last year as tight end 5. Ashton, I'll let you lead this one off. What is it about Zach? Do you expect Zach Ertz to continue his? I mean, he's obviously going to get targets after targets after targets. That's just kind of what you can rely on with Zach Ertz. Does Dallas Goedert worry you at all? Does he seem to have a bigger role in that offense last year? They're expecting Miles Sanders to get a lot bigger role this year. Does any of that worry you when it comes to Zach Ertz?
Yes, I think Dallas Goedert is a rising threat. I don't think he's full blown, you know, stealing everything under the rug from Zach Ertz, but I think he's getting a little bit more trust from Carson Wentz, or giving a little bit more trust to Carson Wentz, and then I think. Just coaching wise, I think he's proven his consistency. So I think they're trusting him to be a target for more of these plays. But and I think on Zach's end, I'm fearing that he's just on the downslope. I think he's losing some of that explosiveness. Some of his route running has fallen out a little bit. And he's just not getting the targets and making the big plays that he used to make before. So I'm a little worried for him this year. But I think just if Wentz can stay healthy and the lack of targets around Ertz will just kind of lead for him to have more volume and be the potential number 1 target. I don't see Deshaun Jackson staying the full season healthy. He gets hurt every 4 games. So
every 1 game last year.
Yeah, that's true. Every 1 game. So, I mean, I just based off of the situation that's going on in Philly, I think he's just reliable, but I wouldn't put him in that top tier that he was a couple years ago.
So I'm looking at it right now. Last year he had 135 targets, which was the 2nd highest in his career. So Dallas Goedert finished as the tight end 10 last year. If I'm looking, I think that's what I saw. So I think I don't think there's an issue with the targets because their wide receivers cannot stay healthy. Alshon Jeffrey in and out, John Jackson. Okay. We'll see how that goes. Jalen Reagor, he's already down. I mean, he's been elite. He's he's had over 100 targets the last 5 years. He's actually younger than Kelsey. He was a little banged up last year. I know he's had some back issues, but he took a little dip in his touchdowns last year. But the whole team, the offense just did not ever seem to get going because people were funneling in and out of that lineup. And I don't know if that happens again this year, it's going to be about the same finish as last year. He's the middle tier of tight ends between him and like Waller. It's a tough place to be, but Zach Ertz has done it for years, so I'm not really too concerned about Dallas Goedert just yet. I think they can, and I mean that by, I think they can support both of them, and like they did last year, to a 5-10 finish, because they've got to throw it to somebody.
It's very true. Yeah, I mean, like you said, there's basically no one else except for Ertz, Kittle, and Kelsey who demand targets, like they do. Like you said, Ertz last year had 135 targets, 156 the year before, has had over 100 targets since 2015. Like, he's going to demand targets in that offense. He's such a big part of that passing offense there. Clearly, he has a rapport with Carson Wentz already built. And like Jacob said, there's not a lot of other options right now. So I don't have any real concerns with Zach Ertz. He constantly is finishing as a top 5 tight end year after year. So he does not worry me at all. I think there's a real 5 safe tight end options in my mind. And then it's just question marks for the rest of the guys. Oh, yeah. There's guys that can be great, but there's also so many question marks that surround them. I think these top 5 guys, if you get one of them, I think you're pretty locked and loaded every week with just throwing them out there. Whereas you have some question marks with the other guys that you might be looking on the waiver wire, depending on matchups and things like that. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot more to say about Ertz. Like, he's going to get targets. He's going to get receptions. He's going to get yards. And he's going to be steady in that in that touchdown category as well. He's going to give you a decent amount of touchdowns. So you can expect pretty consistent production all year with Zach Ertz as well. The next guy on our list is someone who had a breakout year last year. Everybody was kind of calling for it to happen when we were going into drafts last year, and it actually did happen. The hype was real. Darren Waller had a fantastic year last year. He seemed to be the only guy for the Las Vegas Raiders who was relevant in the passing game besides Tyrell Williams when he was out there. But finished as the tight end 3 last year in half-point PPR. Do you guys expect that same level of production? They went out and spent a high first-round pick on Henry Ruggs. Like I was saying earlier, I expect Hunter Renfrow to be a bigger part of that offense this year. Josh Jacobs should be more involved in the receiving. What are y'all's expectations on Waller? We've only seen it 1 year from him, whereas these other guys that we talked about, we've seen, that production before. Maybe outside of Mark Andrews. But what do y'all expect with Waller? I mean, are you guys as confident with Waller as you are with those other 4?
I think he's very reliant on what their offense is going to do. And I don't know, man. I like last year, obviously it was a breakout. He's been around the league for a few years. I think he's had some off-field trouble. Mm-hmm. It's been a great story for him to come back. But Hunter Renfrow was down whenever he really was. I mean, they drafted Hunter Renfrow pretty high last year. Tyrell Williams got injured last year, and it kind of came to where, hey, somebody's got to catch the ball again. And it was Darren Waller. He was there, and then he took a dip once Hunter Renfrow came back. But I don't know how you can give the guy 117 targets and he puts up almost 1,200 yards and he only had 3 touchdowns. I mean, if he had 3 or 4 more touchdowns, he'd be higher up on this list for sure. If he was, but that team is just not. They weren't super efficient. I mean, they had a decent offense, but they weren't anything special. Hopefully, they do take a step forward this year. But that's kind of what it's depending on, the team as a whole and how that scheme is working. I'm not doubting that he can't catch the ball because he had 90 receptions on 117 targets.
Jason Witten's not going to come in there and take that game from him, guys?
As much as I love Jason Witten, he'll take away a couple targets here and again, but I don't think he's a serious threat.
Is it weird seeing him in black and silver?
I haven't seen
a picture yet. and I'm
Ooh,
not looking for it.
Yeah,
I'll send you
I don't
one. I'll
want it
send
to.
you
I
one.
blocked all my internet searches. What about you, Stefan? You got a number 4.
Yeah, for me, I had Waller last year, so I think it might be a little bit of bias for me. He was one of my only really good weapons I had on my team last year. So I do have a special place for Darren Waller. But look, he finished 4 points behind George Kittle for second with only 3 touchdowns. So I mean, that just shows you, the level that he was performing on last year. He could have easily finished as tight end overall 1 if he had some more touchdowns. And I believe 2 of his touchdowns were in the same game last year. So he was getting all the yards and all the receptions. He just couldn't figure out the end zone part for the most part. But he was about as reliable as it gets, especially if you play in a half point or a full point PPR league last year. He just constantly had production game in and game out. My only concern is those targets. They have a lot of new options who are going to demand targets. So I do worry that, he's going to take some regression in that category and just being able to maintain that sort of production without getting the touchdowns is my only question mark. I think he is going to have a steady increase in his touchdowns in order to keep around that same category. But I still, these top 5 guys, I have full confidence in if I get one of them that I'm probably going to start them week in and week out unless there's some sort of injury or development that takes place at the start of the season that, changes from now until then. So, yeah, I'm still fully confident in Darren Waller. I think he is in that same category as Zach Ertz and Mark Andrews as that second tier of tight ends. I still love Darren Waller this year. And you can get him pick 56. So, right around that 5th round value. So at that point, the guys that are around him. I think Darren Waller is a great pick in that round if you're looking to take a really consistent tight end. Nothing to add, Ashton. You're happy with Waller as well?
I think he's great. I just don't think they have a lot to pass to outside of Waller. I think he's their number 1 target inside the red zone, especially. I think he's a playmaker. I'm kind of in agreement with both of y'all on that. I want his consistency to go up a little bit more with
We all do.
Yeah.
We all do.
I think he'll take a jump to at least 5 touchdowns this season. What did he have 3 last year? So I think he'll see an increase in that.
Back-to-back games. I looked at it. He had 2 in one game and then 1 other than he didn't.
Yeah. So
but I did look at, and his yards per catch is the same as Travis Kelce's.
Yeah, I think his touchdowns need to come up, and I think his red zone targets need to come up. But outside of that, I think he's still a consistent play.
Yep. And if you have any doubts that the Ty Williams news should be the solidifier for you that he's still going to be a top target there for Derek Carr. But let's jump into this next tier of tight ends here, because I think this is where more question marks are going to lie.
Into the abyss.
After those top 5 guys, you really you're basically taking a shot. You're looking for upside. You're looking for those guys to break out. But someone who has all the talent in the world to be in that same category of these guys that we've been talking about, but just cannot seem to stay healthy. Seems like the second coming of Jordan Reed. Number 6 on our list. We all have him at number 6, Evan Ingram. Look, I think the only question mark with Evan Ingram is staying on the field. When he's on the field, he produces. He's a target monster. A young guy like Daniel Jones is going to rely on a super athletic tight end like Evan Ingram if he is available, if he is on the field. But that's just the question mark, right? Like, if Evan Ingram can stay healthy, he will finish as a top-tier tight end. But can he stay healthy? They have some options that we saw emerge last year. Darius Slayton, his rookie season, he had a great year. They still have
Sterling
Golden
Shepard.
Tate. They have Sterling Shepard. They have some young guys that can produce. Saquon Barkley is gonna eat targets. But it's just Evan Ingram just cannot seem to stay healthy. Finished as tight end number 18 last year. Played 8 games. So again, it's just the question mark if he can stay healthy. He was on pace to finish as the tight end 6 if he would have played all 16 games. So that kind of just shows you the upside he does have. He has never played a full 16-game season in his 3 years in the NFL. So is there any other question marks for you guys with Evan Ingram? If you are you even going to pick him up in drafts? Is he a guy that you guys target, or for his ADP, do you think he's just too much of an injury concern for you?
Where's he going? Where's he going again? I'm sorry.
He's going 79th overall. So I mean, if you look at, I'll give you some comparisons to the guys around him just to throw you out there. Jared Cook actually goes one pick before him. Deebo Samuel's right after him. Gronk at 81. Edelman at 82. In that category, I mean, is he a guy that meets your fancy, or you'd rather go with someone more reliable like one of those other guys?
If I've drafted the right way up to that point, he played 8 games. He was 18th, top 18 tight end. What does that tell you? Once you get out of the top 5 or 6, like we're talking about, it doesn't matter. I mean, it's going to be hit or miss. That's exactly what's going to be. Boom weeks, bust weeks, or he's out for the rest of the season. He only played 8 games. He started 6 games. So if it comes to you, I mean, if you don't get one of the top guys, don't worry about drafting a tight end until way on later and you've built some depth on your team. And if he comes to you in the 8th or 9th round, I mean, you take a flyer on him, because you're taking a flyer on every other tight end at past that point. And we've actually seen him have some he's flashed some talent before. So I think he's a safer dart or throw shot in the dark than other ones. But it just kind of depends what's going around it and how you've built your team up to that point.
Yeah, I mean, outside of like Hayden Hurst, maybe Jared Cook, and I mean, if y'all are eyeballing Noah Fant,
Blake Jarwin, don't forget him.
Like tight ends like Ingram, Hunter Henry, Tyler Higbee. If I'm in a position where I'm going to start looking to pick them up as my tight end 1, I'm coming up with this game plan to have a backup. Just because I'm worried about.
Yeah,
you
can take some decent sleepers in your last pick of the draft. Like you can get Blake Jarwin at the last pick of your draft every single time. Jonnu Smith is on a lot of he's kind of been out there too. So
yeah, so I mean,
you got options if you don't get them.
Yeah, and y'all know I've experienced Jordan Reed plenty, and just like you said, Stefen, it's Jordan Reed 2.0. And it's a real shame because Jordan Reed was really, really talented. He's he's still playing, but he's a backup tight end now. But
Evan Ingram was a first-round pick.
Yeah, he's super talented.
He's legit. Wow. He's legit when he's healthy and he's on the field. I'm a little bit more up on Evan Ingram this year than I have been in the past because he had
so much of his games that he missed to get back to healthy.
Yes, yeah, he's had a lot,
so much recovery,
a lot of R&R since then.
Yeah.
Well, I think Daniel Jones is going to take a big step up this year too. So I just strategically for game plan, I just think they have a better offense this year, and I think that's just going to hype up the opportunity for Evan Ingram when he's on the field. But that's the problem. He's got to stay on the field. So
yeah. Let me give you a little stat to think about as we move on to the next guy. Okay. In 8 games last year, Evan Ingram had 68 targets, which puts him on pace for 136 targets on the year.
Yep.
Do you know who else finished with 136 targets last year? Travis Kelce, the number 1 tight end. So if you want to play the upside game, he's a good guy to take because he can finish as a top 3 tight end if he plays all 16 games. So it's all about risk reward with Evan Ingram. If you're willing to take that risk, more power to you. Just know that his possibility to finish all 16 games is very slim. So moving on to our number 7 tight end overall, we have Tyler Higbee. Oddly enough, none of us actually have him as number 7, just the way it works out in averages. He does finish as our number 7 tight end. Finished last year as tight end number 8. What do y'all think about Tyler Higbee? I mean, he was kind of
I don't really think much at all about Tyler Higbee.
he kind of emerged towards the back half of the season last year as a bigger target for Jared Goff there. Just to give you a little reference, from week 13 to week 17, he had 8 targets, 11 targets, 14 targets, 11 targets, 12 targets. So he became a big part of that offense towards
He
the
had
end
a
of the
historic
year.
run. I think he had like
Yeah.
hundreds of yards and
Yep.
touchdowns.
Yeah. I mean, look, 107 yards in week 13, 116, 14, 111 in week 15, 104 in week 16, 84 in week 17. So he had a fantastic end of the season run there. But oddly enough, he just couldn't find the room earlier in the season. So do you think it was a fluke? Do you think he's actually a part of this offense now? Look, Brandon Cooks isn't there anymore. You still have Gerald Everett, who's a really talented tight end as well there.
That's the problem. That's the problem for me. Because he went down. I'm pretty sure Everett, did he get injured right towards the end when this happened, when he went wild?
I think they would just kind of like, they would flip-flop him in. Like you
I
would
know they
see
started
big
changing the
games.
scheme and had them both in. But, I mean, what I'm thinking here is I'm not really sold on him with Everett there because Everett is he's good as well. But they pass so much. It's if they keep the same scheme and they've got 2 tight ends on the field a lot, then I could see it definitely happening again. I mean, he finished 8. I think it was 8 last year.
Mhm.
So I don't really have too much to add on Hig Beast.
That's fair.
Big beast.
For me,
Go ahead.
For me, I'm hoping that he is an actual part of this offense now. I think he is a value at this point. If you want to take a shot at one of these guys who can be a top 5 tight end, I think he'll be a guy who's going to be reliable for you. There are a lot of targets to go out in LA. Jared Goff airs the ball out more than I think he's always in the top 3 of attempts since he's been in the NFL. So they're going to throw the ball. And there are a lot of targets open now that Brandon Cooks is gone and Todd Gurley's gone. So if it wasn't a fluke this last half of the season, he should be a great option for you. And he's going around that same category as Evan Ingram. So if you want someone who maybe is a little bit more reliable, who's actually going to be on the field, he might be a better option than Ingram. If you want the upside, I think Evan Ingram's probably the way to go.
Yeah, I think there's a strong upside to it, but I think there could be a pretty low floor as well. Just with Robert Woods, Cooper Kupp in the mix too, they're going to be passing the ball a ton. If Gerald Everett gets out there and takes targets away, that's going to hurt as well. But the potential's there for him to be really good. It's just a matter of how they utilize them.
Yeah. We just haven't seen a big sample size with Higbee yet to produce. So again, like we said, there are a lot of question marks for these back half of our top 10 here. And I think none more than the next guy we're about to talk about, Hayden Hurst.
Yes, sir.
We have a little bit of varying opinions on him. Ashton, you have him at 11, Jacob at 7 at the highest, and myself at 9. With Hayden Hurst, I think he's just stepping into a great opportunity. I think really that's the only thing we have to base why we have him at this point. He was a first-round pick, so he does have draft capital to go with him. He has moved on from Baltimore, moved on from the overshadowing
Mark Andrews'
of Mark
shadow.
Andrews.
Yeah, exactly.
And has a chance to step into that Austin Hooper role where we saw Austin Hooper succeed last year. So we expect the talent to still be there from college and expect him to be an option for Matt Ryan to throw to. Jacob, since you are the highest on him, let's hear what why you have him at 7, why you have the faith in him.
Absolutely. So obviously we just talked about, he was in Mark Andrews' shadow. And I think it just worked out that way where Mark Andrews he just stepped into it. He fit what they were doing there. And I mean, Hayden Hurst was a first round pick as well. So the draft capital's there, like you said. In his limited opportunities, he's done. I mean, he had 39 targets last year. He had 30 receptions and 2 touchdowns. And the guy he played 16 games last year, 12 games the year before. When he was a rookie, it wasn't about being injured. I think he might be just kind of, I don't know if he was blocking more, but it was just a rotation door of, they always have good tight ends in Baltimore, and Andrews was the one who was able to make it happen when he was out there. But he's going down to Atlanta. As we've talked about, Matt Ryan, this is his every other year, so it's gonna be a number 2 year for him down there. They're gonna be passing it all over the place. And Austin Hooper's gone. He was someone that was the number 1 tight end for the first 7-8 games or last year before he got injured. So I don't think he's gonna just start right there being number 1, but where he's going in your drafts is where you're gonna get that value that where he's going and he's gonna be. I think he could be top 7, top 6, where those guys that actually matter. And he's got the opportunity down there. Like I said, taken over for Austin Hooper on a one of the most pass heavy offenses in the league. So I'm very, very excited for Hayden Hurst.
Yeah, he's a tremendous talent. I think Atlanta got him for a steal too. I just think
11.
I think he's just gonna
Is
yeah,
he a
I have him.
Gronk
I have him.
hire?
Yes, I do. Well, there's a way bigger sample size from Gronk than there is Hayden Hurst.
That's fair.
But I think I think he has a lot of potential to be a top 5 tight end this year. But I think he's going to have a slow start. I think they're probably going to utilize him more for more of a block position tight end than anything else at the beginning of the season. And I think it's kind of lean more towards the run game with Todd Gurley, and then rely heavily on Julio Jones and Calvin Ridley at the beginning of the season. I think he's going to develop more towards the back half of the season and could potentially see a real big boom on the back half. It could be a little bit earlier, but that's just my prediction. So I'm just a little hesitant with that. Shortened off season, coming into the mix, new offense, but I think the talent's there. I'm a little worried about opportunity straight out of the gates.
That's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think out of all the tight ends, Hayden Hurst is the biggest value based on his potential upside. He's the only guy that's going where he's going that can potentially realistically finish as a top 5 tight end at the end of the year. He's being drafted as the overall 112. So, I mean, at that range, you're taking absolute shots anyway. A lot of those guys aren't going to end up on your team past the first couple of weeks. He's being drafted as the 13th tight end off the board. And look, Atlanta has faith in him. They didn't even make an offer for Austin Hooper to stay. They believed that Hayden Hurst could step right into the role. They traded a 2nd-round pick to Baltimore to get Hayden Hurst. So, that's a lot of confidence in a guy that they think can step in right away, and they expect to step in right away. Hooper was on pace last year for 119 targets. So they want to make the tight end a part of their game plan. So I think Hayden Hurst is going to have a fantastic opportunity to be a super productive fantasy tight end this year. Tight end 13 is his absolute rock bottom floor. So where he's being drafted is the biggest value at tight end that you can find this year.
Where he's going way before that though.
Yeah, and leagues where you have a sophisticated drafters, people know that he's going to have a great opportunity this year. But I mean, for what we're seeing in terms of ADP across the board, he is still being drafted as tight end 13.
Right. I'm just saying, if you're targeting him, he is someone you want to snag. Just be aware that he's going earlier than his ADP right now.
Yeah. Most people do have an idea about, that opportunity there. So be smart. Try to take him around too early. If you do,
I got him in round 9. I'm just looking at it. Round 9.
Yep.
Well, you took a lot of things earlier than you should have there, bud.
Right out beneath your feet.
All right, so let's move on to our second to last tight end here. Had a pretty good year last year. Had a lot of touchdowns. Finished as tight end number 7. Jared Cook. Ashton, you have him at 10. Jacob at 11. And myself at 7 once again. Currently being drafted as tight end number 9. Going 1 pick before Evan Ingram. Is a little older. Jacob, why don't you have any faith in Jared Cook this year?
It's really age, and he hasn't had some crazy career. I mean, he's been pretty good. He's never really had. I mean, 2018 with Las Vegas, the Raiders, he had his best year, almost 900 yards. It's just, I don't know, man. He's He's on a team with Michael Thomas, who's going to be taking the ball all over the place. I mean,
Now they got
one
Emmanuel
thing
Sanders
they
and
got the Sandy man out there, Kamara, maybe Kamara, hopefully Kamara, please God Kamara. But what I'm looking at, I mean, he's been pretty efficient, okay, but he does have one of the most accurate QBs in the league, whose arm is getting weak, and so he could very well end up at number 7. I just kind of I think Ingram's got higher upside. I think Higbee's got higher upside, and it's really the upside that I'm looking at, and that's why he's where I have him. But I could totally see him. He was at 7 last year, has finished. So for him to do that again, I wouldn't be surprised, because maybe Sanders just opens it up for him even more underneath, and those short passes that Drew Brees is going to be throwing. He doesn't really have the deep ball anymore. He's one of the most accurate QBs, and he's throwing shorter passes. So I think it could be big time for Cook if that works out for him, but he's old as well. So there's that. About Gronk age.
I'm just concerned about your fear of age here, man. It's 2020, man. Age is just a number these days.
That's true.
I think he's going to stay within 10 targets on either side. I mean, I could see it going up 10. I can see it going down 10. I'm a little worried that he's not going to reach 9 touchdowns again this year, especially with Emmanuel Sanders coming in. It's going to take some opportunity away from him there. But I still think he's going to be a go-to target for Drew Brees. I'm just not as high on him as I was last year.
Yeah, I mean, my biggest concern is the same thing. Like, he just doesn't command as many receptions and targets as these other guys we've talked about. He's not going to be in that same category. He's not going to be a 100-target guy. Last year, his first year on New Orleans, he only had 65 targets. He just made the best out of them. 9 touchdowns on 65 targets isn't
pretty good.
It's not repeatable. Like, it's just not something that you can expect. I do think he's still going to be a big red zone option for Drew Brees. He's a big guy, 6'5", like 250. So he's going to be a guy who will be targeted in the red zone, and to have a quarterback like Drew Brees is a huge benefit for you. If Jared Cook was on another team, I don't think he would be in this conversation. But because of, having Drew Brees on his side, he is still a top 10 tight end for us. And I think around that 9-10 spot you're going to see a waiver guy end up here anyway. It's going to be a guy who isn't going to be drafted, who's going to, break onto the scene. It doesn't really take a lot to finish as a top 10 tight end. So Jared Cook is a guy that if you expect the touchdowns to maintain, he could be a good option for you. Just don't expect the same amount of targets and the same amount of receptions. Someone who I think is maybe a better option if you're playing in a standard league, not as strong of a category if you're playing in half point or a full point PPR league. But let's move on to number 10. I think a guy who's probably in that same discussion as Evan Ingram, who when he is healthy, he is fantastic. But just having issues with staying on the field. Still pretty young. Hunter Henry, Ashton, you have him at 8, Jacob at 9, and myself at 12. Has a new quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. Finished last year as tight end 9, playing only 12 games. But he's currently being drafted as tight end 6, which is, I think, the big drawback from Hunter Henry. Currently going as the 66th overall pick. 2 picks in front of Tyler Higbee. Ashton, what is your take on Hunter Henry this year? You have him as you're the most optimistic about him, I guess. So what do you think with Hunter Henry?
I think he's going to be a quick go-to for Tyrod. I think they're going to catch him on the slant, or he's going to be a dunk pass on the outside for Tyrod on a quick scramble. And if he can stay healthy, the health is a concern to me. But if he can stay healthy, I think he's a tremendous talent. I think he's a nice size target he was a nice size target for Phillip Rivers, but now that Tyrod is back in there and leading the pack, I think he's just going to be a consistent target for him as long as he's on the field. Keenan Allen's going to get a lot of the attention on deeper routes, so I think he's just going to have to rely on his ability to run solid routes and just get himself open. So, and use his size. I mean, that's my belief. I have to see it in action because it's a strange offense now, and I don't know the full game plan, what they're going to do, but that's just kind of how I see it going, at least for the first.
I just got a notification that said Tyrod Taylor is to start most, if not all, 2020 games.
I don't know if I buy into
Big
that.
take, yeah.
That's what they told me.
Yeah.
Also, this has nothing to do with Henry, but this has to do with Leonard Fournette. Apparently, the Chiefs are interested in Leonard Fournette now that he's cleared waivers.
Wow, that would be a huge downgrade to Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
CEH.
Should something happen with that?
But I'll give a quick.
Especially since I just drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Hey, I play you first week. Hopefully they sign them on in, boy.
Sweet.
Nah. I'll give a quick opinion here on Henry. Kind of what Stefen was talking about earlier. Can't deny the talent. Can't deny the injury risk. And there are some benefits maybe with Tyrod Taylor being there, those little baby passes. But basically, I think they're kind of a rush heavy offense as it is. You know, they like to run the ball, like to play good defense, and I just don't see Tyrod airing it out for like extended, just big plays in general. But Mike Williams is injured right now, so you're looking at Keenan Allen and
Austin Eckler. That's your
So there you
receiving
go.
option.
So he could definitely finish up higher. I know he's kind of starting to surge up draft boards a bit. So he's got the potential. You just got to hope he can stay on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I like Hunter Henry as a tight end. I just do not like him at his price. I think where he's being drafted is his ceiling to be tight end 6. And to spend a 66 overall pick for Hunter Henry, I think it's too much for me. That's why I'm a little lower on him. But I mean, he is super good when he's on the field, and he's a guy who you're going to plug in if he is healthy. He just hasn't played a full season yet. I mean, he missed the entirety of 2018. He played 12 games last year. So I'm just a little worried about his ability to stay on the field. You know, you can take the Tyrod Taylor thing as an upgrade or a downgrade, depending on how you want to look at it. A lot of quarterbacks who, you know, maybe aren't the locked and loaded top tier quarterbacks rely on tight ends pretty heavily, what we've seen in the past. But again, with these guys in the back half of our top 10, there is question marks with every single one of them. So it just depends on how you want to look at it. But for me, the ADP is just too high right now for me. If he's going to fall in your drafts to be somewhere in that Cook range, or if he's going down to Hurst range, stuff like that. I mean, I'd still rather have Hayden Hurst on my team. I'd rather have Higbee on my team. I'd even rather have Ingram on my team just for the upside. So Hunter Henry, just for me, isn't a guy that I'm targeting in drafts this year. I don't. There's too many question marks with him for me to really consider. But that wraps it up for our tight ends. We have successfully completed all of our positional rankings, guys. I'm
What
sure
a marathon!
They will change once week 1 comes around next week.
Let's go.
I know we're all super excited for the season to start. Moving forward, we will be doing 2 shows a week to prepare you for all the games to come. As of right now, I think we have discussed potentially a Monday and a Friday show, Tuesday and Friday.
Basically, we don't know
was
what
it
we're
Wednesday?
doing.
Was it?
Just be prepared for 2 shows a week where we will.
They're going to be coming.
You'll
Keep your eyes
get them
out.
when you get them.
Make sure you're subscribed. They're gonna pop up on your phone. Say, "Hey, new podcast is out." That's when you'll know when they're coming out. But there will be 2. I think we're gonna kind of look at it on a game by game breakdown and kind of give the guys that we're expecting to do well in those games and kind of break it down like that.
Yep, a lot of good things coming to hopefully get you to that championship glory. So tell your mom, tell your kids, tell your friends to tune in. We are available on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube. We have socials on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you guys have any questions as we get into the season, if you want to know who to start. If you want advice coming into your drafts, make sure to hit us up on any of our social medias, and we will try to answer all of your questions on the next couple episodes, if not directly back to you. But hey, guys, let's get excited for week 1 next week.
Yes, sir. Next week, we're going to be doing it.
That does it for tight ends. I'll see you guys next week.
Adios.
Goodbye.